Okay, these are flying geese, and I'm going to show you a quick trick way of making them, and this technique makes 4 of them. This is considered the goose, or I don't know if there's a plural or not, but anyway, that is the main goose, and this is considered the background, and it can be light dark, it can be dark light, depending on what your project is. First thing to do is what will become the large piece, the goose, starts with a large square, and what will become the background starts with 4 smaller squares. And the first thing you do is draw a diagonal on the back of 2 of the squares. And you lay them right sides together to the large square. So they're all right sides together, and the diagonal needs to follow through from both pieces. It's a good idea to stick a pin in it just to hold it so it doesn't shift when you go to the machine. Okay. Then, as we've done with half square triangles and quarter square triangles, we're going to sew on either side of a diagonal. So let's move to the machine. And here's my diagonal and my scant 1/4 inch seam. And I am sewing all the way down on the right side. Remember, in these techniques, the drawn line is always the cutting line. I am coming to the second square. I just continue on from one right through to the other. Then I'm going to turn around and do the same thing on the other side. If you have a lot of these, you can chain piece. But again, coming down the other side, remember, stitch before you cut. Sew before you cut, all the way down. Now let's go over to the, remember my little piece of funny fabric? Let's come over to the cutting table. There is a little bit of bulge in here, so I would normally press that flat, hit it flat with the iron. I have a cutting line, and it's sewed on both sides. I now can cut on the drawn line all the way through. You now have 2 pieces that look like this, and let's come over to the ironing board. And what I need to do now is push these small triangles out, away from the big one, and press them down, and you're going to get what I kind of call dog ears. They look like dog ears. And the same thing on the other piece. Okay, push the little ones away from the big one and press. That's it. My iron is not very hot, but you get the idea. Then let's come back to the machine. Come back to the cutting table for a minute. And now I have 2 more squares. And I have a diagonal drawn on each one. And now place the small square, this is the 3rd one, in this direction toward the 2 that you have just pressed away. And it's going to look just like that. Again, pop a pin in it. You do the same thing here. Lay it in the corner with the diagonal going toward the 2 little triangles, and hold it with a pin, and let's come back to the machine. And once again, drawn line is the cutting line, but we sew first. So I am sewing on the right side, and when I come, keep your squares lined up here. When I come to the end, I simply go right through, and I'm going to continue with the second one and chain piece because I have 2 of them, so it's silly to turn around when I can chain. Going all the way through to the end. Turn around, come down on the other side. And all the way to the second piece. You can clip this. I find it a little bit easier to clip it. Come to the end. Lay the next one in. And there you are. Just as in the other triangles, I'm sewing on both sides of the cutting line. Now, let's come back to the cutting table. And again, I have a cutting line. Now that I've sewed on both sides of it, I can cut. And I can cut. And after I do, I simply press this out and press this out, and I have 4 flying geese. They are ready for trimming now. I always give you an extra 1/8 of an inch in dimension, which will, the numbers will depend on what project we're doing, but there they are, ready to go. I want to turn this one into a 3.5 by 6. It will finish 3 by 6. So what I need to do now, I gave you a little bit of an extra measurement. Take your ruler and find 3 inches. It'll be 3 inches for this project. And you have a diagonal line and a diagonal line on the geese. Line them up just like that. And find 3.5, which is right here. And if you look, you'll see just a little bit of trim, a little bit of raggedy edge here. That's the trim. And there you are. If you check in this direction, you should be okay. This should be 6.5. It is 6.5. If it isn't, you can trim just a little bit. But there is 1, 2, 3, and 4. You always get 4, and that's it. They always come out perfectly. Cut these little guys off. You don't need them. They always come out perfectly because you have sewed before you cut. And that's flying geese.